Dragon Age is about dominating the battlefield. It's about that moment when you charge, that tension of not being certain, and then seeing your characters slice heads off, throw spells, set things on fire, until essentially you bring it to a crashing close and say, yeah, this one I won, now I've got 400,000 more to go.
Dragon Age is really a return to the thing that brought me to BioWare in the first place. When I started at BioWare back in Baldur's Gate 1 days, we were making the pinnacle of fantasy gaming, and I think we've really come back to that with Dragon Age Origins. What we've done is we've taken the best of high fantasy and the best of darker, lower fantasy and combined them into one game. So you're taking, like the Tolkien, the overarching good versus evil metaphor that draws you through a high fantasy game, but the darker, grayer choice and consequence of something like a George R.R. Martin or a Conan, and we combine them. So you're playing as a Grey Warden, and you have to save the world, but the way you do that sometimes means you have to make some pretty tough choices.
I think with Origins, what we managed to hit is a note of the familiar and yet the uncanny. It's certainly a game that's going to have elves with pointy ears. Yeah, we're not going to challenge the dwarves. Many of them do have beards, for sure. But within those expectations, we understand them well enough ourselves that we've managed to break a lot of them and say, you know, sure, the elves do have pointy ears, but they're also, up until recently, enslaved and live in ghettos in the city. This kind of puts you in a place where you know what you're dealing with an elf, but you don't know what you're dealing with when it comes to Dragon Age. It's a different setting for the familiar to occur, and it will surprise you.
It's very, very complicated and intricate. And I mean, this game not only looks realistic, in a way, the story also is quite realistic.
You would attempt to put a puppet on the throne, and every soul here knows it. The better question is who will pull the strings?
So this is a world already with a lot of conflict going on, and now when we start off Dragon Age Origins, a blight, these darkspawn rising back from under the ground are coming to consume the earth once again, and this is what you're fighting against.
Farewell, Mother. Do not forget the stew on the fire. I would hate to return to a burned-down hut.
Bah! 'Tis far more likely you will return to see this entire area, along with my hut, swallowed up by the blight.
All I meant was...
Yes, I know.
The characters in the game aren't two-dimensional. The way that a player interacts with them is going to change who they become.
They have their own motivations and their own desires and their own hopes and dreams.
You're going to have party members talking to each other, they're bantering.
Having Morgan and Wynne in your party at the same time, because they're both mages but coming from very different schools of thought on magic, there's going to be a lot of bickering, a lot of different discussion on the way magic works, just by having those two people in your party.
They're reacting to everything that you do. You'll take an action in the world, and a party member will speak up, and perhaps they'll object, perhaps they'll approve, and you may change your course of action based on that, or suffer the consequences, right? The consequences are what the game is all about.
It's like dancing on a field of razor blades, so it may be possible to make it through Dragon Age Origins with everyone happy, but you're going to have to be really careful about what you're doing.
There was a lot of writing that went into Dragon Age. I mean, in excess of 800,000 lines of dialogue, all of it recorded.
It appears it will be civil war after all, despite the Darkspawn. Pity.
When people talk about the world in the game, it's with the idea that there's more than what they're talking about, and I think that comes across to the player, right?
No one has a place here. Your farmers wish to be merchants. The merchants dream of being nobles, and the nobles become warriors. No one is content to be who they are.
When I play games, you can tell very quickly, usually, if what is present is all that's been created. And then there's other times when you're reading a book or when you're playing a game, and you can sort of feel immediately that there's this whole breadth of history that the game creator is just dying to get you to fall in love with. And that's what I'm hoping, that the fans will get into this world and they will fall in love with it and see exactly what we've put together for them and value it.
One of the great things about working on Dragon Age is that The development team has really challenged itself to bring something new to the fantasy genre. It's a genre that's so saturated that we really have been pushing ourselves to stand out, to bring something fresh and unique, and I really enjoy that process.
Ferelden itself is actually kind of almost a barbaric nation, not too far away from being really uncivilized.
It's a land that was occupied by the Empire of Orlais, which is its neighbor, for a generation until it finally broke free, and all of a sudden the Blight begins. So suddenly this nation that's just starting to get its feet now has to deal with a crisis that threatens to destroy it.
We're not telling a story with words alone in Dragon Age Origins. What's in the levels actually tell you a visual story and also an archaeological story as you're going through the game.
Villages and cities that have existed for hundreds of years, but they've gone through multiple iterations of war and rebuilding, so you have all these layers built on top of one another.
They'll tell of the ancient Fereldans. They'll tell of the strife with the Tevinter Empire long ago. They'll tell of the great, wondrous battles that have taken place, and you're just now walking through the sort of the ashes of these great conflicts.
We definitely pulled a lot of historical architectural reference.
We were trying to make something to where you could imagine people working, living, breathing in these spaces.
The dwarves, which are very Aztecian, Mayan influenced, very angular shapes. You have the humans, some of the Anglo-Saxon 1200 AD influences.
You know, lots of timber, lots of like rough stone. It definitely makes it feel like it's kind of almost like the frontier of a fantasy nation. The first step that you have to take in creating levels is coming up with your core concept. Every inch of a level is an opportunity for us to engage you in combat, to tell a story, or to take your breath away. For example, one of the most visually stunning places that we have is the Urn of Sacred Ashes, an ancient place built kind of at the early days of the church. We always wanted to have a very striking entrance, which gives you a sense of age and history and grandeur. You would go through and figure out what happens in every individual room, so people would have a map of what to do for the art level creation side, and also for later on for you when you're actually bringing it to life with creatures and combat.
So one of the huge advantages we had on Dragon Age Origins was the fact that we were able to do a lot of early development in the Neverwinter Nights engine.
This is the Urn of Sacred Ashes, the way that we built it in the Neverwinter prototype. We wanted to make sure that the gameplay, the story, and all the design elements really worked and fit together. And now we'll show you what it looks like in the final game. And as you're about to see, this is the same entrance in the Dragon Age engine.
That whole process can take, on a small level or a simple level, could take a week, where some of the more complex ones can take months and months and months. You know, that's a huge undertaking.
Ferelden is just one country on the main continent in Dragon Age universe, so there's certainly a lot more to explore and talk about in the future.
When you think of fantasy, you may think of majestic, beautiful creatures, but in Dragon Age is truly a dark, evil, and twisted world, so our intent was to turn these creatures into walking nightmares. Your fellow humans, elves, dwarves, and other races of Ferelden have been transformed into the minions of evil.
The concept artists really had to pull out the horror and really work with evil, paint the face of evil. We really want to create a sense of immediate terror, but then almost I think there's a sense of sympathy too, how you can almost tell that we could become this if we made the wrong choices.
There's over 30 races of monsters and demons. The Dragon Age art team has been working hard on these characters for several years.
There's a lot of different people and a lot of different departments that actually work on one character. It'll go from design into concepting.
Because it's very time-consuming to make it, we have to make sure we get it right on paper first, and important creatures may receive half a dozen iterations before we commit to building it.
From there, we had to figure out how to bring that piece to life from a technical standpoint. There's modeling, texturing, and rigging, and then it finally falls into the hands of the animators.
We'll work very closely with the animation team to make sure that the model's working correctly. Then we'll make sure that it gets into the designer's hands again so it can be implemented into the game and used correctly.
As a concept artist, we really have two jobs. One is to build the blueprints and lay the foundation in order to actually build the things that go into creating a world. The second is to inspire the team, to create the images that really get everyone pumped up. On Dragon Age, the level of detail in each concept is staggering. Each one is a piece of art unto itself. One great example is the work of Sung Kim. The level of love he puts into this stuff is impressive. One of the best creatures for me is from the Darkspawn. It's the Hurlock. He's got that horrifying grin, permanent grin on his face with big pointy teeth. It looks like you can tell it was once a man, and that's what makes it so terrifying, is the fact that you can almost tell that its descendants were like us and that he's just been suffering for millennia. In order to make things scary, sometimes you just need to take something recognizable and make it look like it's painful. Start bringing in those symbols that we recognize for death and for decay.
The job of a character artist is to take the concepts and interpret into 3D models for the world. My personal favorite creature that I got to work on Dragon Age Origins was the Darkspawn Ogre.
We tried to make the ogre so terrifying in his appearance that the player wouldn't believe that he could actually beat it in combat.
I was really looking forward to it. The concept was very unique, and it was a bit of a challenge to actually bring it into the 3D environment with the different elements.
It might seem like a strange thing to say when working on a fantasy game, but realism is a very important part of this process. If you don't believe that they're real, then none of it affects you. It's nothing.
I mean, the level of detail on these creatures is amazing. I mean, you can zoom right into any part of them from any angle, and they look absolutely fabulous.
So here we have the Pride Demon. It's one of the largest creatures in the game. From this concept, we'll make a 3D concept out of it. Once we do that, we'll take this basic mesh and we'll go ahead and paint a really detailed, sculpted model. We'll take this and we'll make a projection so we can get all these little details into a texture, and then place that texture onto the mesh that you saw before, and you'll get your finished model with all its texture and glory.
Making a creature scary is more than just making it big. It's really the way the creature moves that indicates its strength, its mass, and its bulk. Animation is really about performance, and the same way that an actor gets prepared for a role in learning and studying what this character thinks, what this character feels, the animator is, it's his job to bring that to the character in a more digital form. The great thing about working on Dragon Age is that the animators have the ability to start bringing not only humanoid characters to life, but also larger characters, more interesting, dynamic characters like dragons and ogres and the undead. So this is what the ogre puppet looks like once the rigging and the modelers have finished working with it, and now the animators can take it and start making it move.
Sometimes we would just act it out, like get up and physically act out how like an ogre would move.
As you can see, when the ogre hits the ground, his entire body shakes from the massive impact of his size, and that's a really nice detail.
See the ogre finally in the game and working and animating and all its terrifying glory is actually it's quite surreal.
When you're working with such a big creative team, everyone is coming to the table with their own style, with their own techniques. And as the development process goes along and you start building a world together, it becomes one language. And that language becomes something like Dragon Age Origins.
When we set down to design the combat system for Origins, I think we were trying to modernize a classic. Baldur's Gate 2 has always been a reference point for us as the game that really let you feel like you were mixing classes, abilities, combinations, smart planning, and on-the-moment thinking. So we decided to modernize that. Realistic combat fighting styles, like actually, you know, the weight of the sword, the presence of a maul smashing into a body, all of these things are really key for us. And I think what we resulted in is something you just have to think of as like sword porn. It's for the enthusiast. In terms of looking at source material, I think you have to look at classics. You know, the Lord of the Rings, 300, and certainly, you know, even some of the older stuff. Go back to the really best fight scenes you'd find in the Conan movies. Even this is a brutal time to be in, and we wanted to evoke that feeling. What we wanted to achieve was the sense that you could be both the general lieutenant, that kind of commander role, as well as the guy just leading the charge. So we've put together several systems, including a tactics system that lets you fully control the AI of your characters, and of course just smart reactions to the way the enemies occur. So you kind of have that moment where you plan. You see the enemy, you're thinking like, how do I enact this grand strategy to make these characters do as much friggin' damage as I can? And then once you charge in there, the battle's just a swirling melee. You've got positioning, moving your rogues around behind so they're just jamming their swords into kidneys. You have your warriors just holding that line, and your mages kind of holding the back line, just raining death upon your foes. So it's very in your face once you're engaged, but you always have that little moment just before where you go, oh, I know what's coming, and here's my plan. Often what you'll want to do is deal with the strategic impact of the equipment and the talents that you've chosen. So you want to try and mix your characters for maximum effectiveness. All characters have a sense of whether they're being flanked or whether the character's directly behind them. There's direct bonuses to everyone who's making attacks from those kind of harder to defend arcs. Even the sense of, you know, what weapon, what side are you using can affect things like sweeping attacks when you're swinging double weapons. You can certainly use barricades, walls, things like that to block incoming enemy fire, so you can actually make advances carefully under cover. And then things like elevation really do play into the mechanics as well. Even what you wear affects the tactics you're going to employ in Dragon Age Origins. The heaviest armors in the game are going to protect you, but at the same time, they're going to slow you down. You're going to be fatigued just by wearing them, so you won't be able to pull off as many special moves. Finishing moves are the way that we've managed to basically imply that the combat has a momentum. Finishing move is this awesome visceral moment where it's, you know, sword through the chest, boom, off comes his head. You know, smashing a guy with a maul so he goes spinning through the air and lands in front of you. Or possibly killing a really large creature by actually climbing on top of it and jamming your blade in.
We had some stunt actors from the movie 300, like doing some cool swings, cool death blow moves.
And it's not just about flash. As you wear your opponents down, the game is dynamically adjusting the incidence of these happening. We're essentially rewarding your combat dominance. As your opponents are worn down, their morale's starting to break, and you are just crushing them on the battlefield, you'll notice that your characters are finishing them with far more frequency. More heads come off, more chests are pierced. It's pretty fantastic. Designing combat isn't just about, you know, rules and a couple of animations. It's about the entire experience, as far as I'm concerned. When a player comes out of a combat, what I really want is that sense of tension, and then that release of, man, look at what I just pulled off. That sense of orchestrating something. I don't want to make a game that just softballs and you're like, oh yeah, I killed that guy again. No, I want you to feel challenged and like you were rewarded for playing smart. For me, one of the most exciting parts, I think, will be the war stories. You know, the forum posts, the water coolers. People even on the team are already discussing ways they dealt with Boss X. And that's pretty cool and very, very, very rewarding because it feels like the game was one that they played and it was for them.
The sound design of Dragon Age is about creating the immersion in a world of dark fantasy. Dragon Age is probably the biggest game I've ever worked on and is about the size of 3 of the biggest games that I've ever worked on combined. Mythical creatures are probably one of the most challenging things to do in sound design.
We have a breakdown of the Deep Stalker, a couple of different samples used, one of which is a human imitating a cat. The cat itself, a lizard, and lastly we have a dolphin. Let's mix them together, you get this.
I think you'll find that the audio experience of the cinematics is on par with what you will experience in a movie. You have a huge full-scale battle, enormous changes in perspective. You have very strong emotional undertones to the whole scene, so you're moving between telling the story from an emotional perspective and telling it from an action perspective.
The darkness of this game really is being enhanced by the music, and the music really goes beyond dark.
They returned as monsters, the first of the Darkspawn.
We actually have the Seattle Northwest Sinfonia play all the music for us.
The score is epic in both its grandeur and orchestration. It's also epic in the amount of music that we had to compose.
I think I've composed about 6 to 7 specific themes, but I also had to make sure that the score is cohesive enough. I took what we call the main theme and then I'm weaving it underneath all the time. If not the actual melody, I'm doing the harmony. If not the harmony, some elements from the rhythm. But you could always hear some elements from the Grey Warden's world.
I'd be going back to review scenes that I previously had the temp music in, and a scene would go from being maybe flat or comic to really engaging me.
I think that actually what I really enjoyed to work on this game was actually the songwriting.
Simon, I believe, called Anon up and said, you know, here is a set of lyrics that the writing team has come up with. You know, why don't you and Aubrey collaborate on something? The very next morning, Anon called me up and said, I have something, come over and record it. And I said, okay. And I came over and I really connected with it right off the bat. And we sewed it up, you know, and sent it over within 24 hours.
She has a great melodic sense, and many times she will just, you know, sing almost exactly what I wrote, but then she will make this little change.
I think it's probably one of Enon's best scores. It's certainly the best score that I've worked on.
Simon Pressey, I mean, he basically was guiding me from one hand, letting me fly, but from the other hand, really directing my flight path.
So the making of Dragon Age Audio was a team collaborative effort. 10 guys putting everything they've got into bringing that fantasy to life. They pulled off what was really a massive task. It sounds way better than I anticipated it would sound.
Dragon Age is a big game. And while that's a great value for the consumer, it's a giant pain in the ass.
There was a lot of long nights, there was a lot of hard crunch, but I mean, when you're working on something that you love, you don't really mind so much.
Working with our team was awesome. I mean, everybody put in 110%.
It was big. At our peak, we were around 150 people, but we really came together as a team. And it doesn't really matter anymore if you're a programmer or you're an artist. It just matters that you want to make the best thing possible.
I think one of the greatest challenges was understanding that our audience has grown up. The industry as a whole is older. It's not this thing relegated to kids anymore. And understanding that what we almost had was a mandate to make sure that the game had punch.
In some ways, we felt like we were out to prove ourselves as not only a team, but as a company again. And I don't know, that was something that was very exciting. Dragon Age is a funny game in some respects because it's something that you're not going to understand the breadth of it and the scope of the world until you sit down and you actually find yourself in the middle of it, and then you'll be like, wow, there's so much here.
Dragon Age is a universe that has a story that spans thousands of years. Dragon Age Origins takes place over maybe a year, maybe 2 years at most, depending on how exactly you're playing it. So as you can imagine, there's hundreds and hundreds of additional stories to tell in this same space. And I think you're going to see a lot more coming from us soon.
Hi, I'm Mike Laidlaw, lead designer for Dragon Age Origins. With me is Catherine Lundgren, and welcome to Warden's Training. Now, with Dragon Age Origins, of course, the key to success is actually balancing your party, getting together your allies, getting together your equipment, getting everything really set up so that your group complements one another. If you get them all working together, you're able to dominate in combat. And towards that end, what we're going to do today is show you how to kind of optimize a warrior, a wizard, or a rogue. So let's take a look at Warrior and the ways that you can build them. The nice thing about Warriors is that they're very focused in terms of what they do. They're there to basically either deal massive amounts of damage or take massive amounts of damage, and in an ideal case, both. The key statistics you'll want to be focusing on with Warrior are, of course, strength to dish out the damage, dexterity to maybe miss a few of those hits and make sure you're accurate, and of course, high constitution because it translates directly into how healthy your character is, meaning that they can take more punishment. With the warrior's talents, it's key to make sure that you really decide what kind of warrior you want to play. Now, there's a number of different builds. We're going to focus on two for you today. With the classic sword and shield build, you're a straight-up defender. You're able to hold as many enemies' attention as you can, and we're going to take a look at some key talents that will help you do that. Many of them lie in the warrior tree. First off, you want to make sure that you're running Threaten. It's a sustained ability that will actually keep the attention focused on you. And whenever anything breaks away and starts pounding on the weaker members of the party, you're going to want to make sure that you have Taunt. It's an activated ability, pulls everyone right back to you. Some other key defenses, of course, lie in the sword and shield tree. You'll be starting with Shield Bash. That's a nice basic offensive ability, but some key ones actually lie in that middle channel where you'll find Shield Defense and Shield Wall, and two talents that actually benefit them, making them stronger and more effective. Balancing between these two talents can actually let you adjust to very accurate enemies or enemies who do lots of damage. And finally, at the bottom of that third tree there, you'll actually see Shield Mastery. With it, every sword and shield ability you have gains some small bonus. It is one of the most powerful abilities, and certainly a good reason for you to build your dexterity up to 26, which is one of those things you're going to have to keep an eye out for when you're building this type of character. Of course, a lot of times when you're playing a warrior, you just want to be on the front lines kicking as much ass as you possibly can, and that's fair. What we want to build for you is a warrior that's exceptional at two-handed weapons. One of the most key abilities for you is going to be Death Blow. Two-handed swords are heavy, they take a lot of your stamina, but with Death Blow, every kill you get is going to restore a little bit of it. That means you can keep swinging a lot harder, a lot longer. On top of that, you'll want to make sure you focus on the two-handed weapon abilities. With them, you'll actually be able to make yourself completely immune to knockdown and stun effects by taking Indomitable. That's one of your key abilities as this type of character, meaning you can keep dishing out the damage. On top of that, you want to make sure you're looking at some of the other heavier attacks, and two-handed sweep is one of the key ones there, allowing you to dish out damage in an AoE, kind of a cone in front of you, sending guys flying. Warriors are made and broken by their armor and equipment, and every warrior is going to want to get their hands on the Juggernaut suit of armor. It not only provides excellent physical resistance, but also allows you to shrug off elemental damage, meaning many spells are going to do less damage to you. To get it, you'll want to come here to the Brisilian Forest and keep an eye out for these tombstones. To begin the quest that gets you the Juggernaut armor, you're going to want to come here to this north central part of the East Brisilian Forest, and then head out and look for the other tombstones that are scattered around the two different areas. Each piece of the Juggernaut armor is guarded by a group of undead, led by a revenant. This means you're in for one hell of a fight. You'll want to make sure that your party's spread out and cleared away. Only the toughest of your characters should be up close and fighting hand-to-hand with the revenant. Keep an eye on your equipment as well, and the way you've enchanted your weapons and the kind of spells that you're using. Bringing cold damage to this fight won't do you any favors. All of the undead that are present are going to be shrugging off that damage as if it were nothing. With the revenant dead, you'll have your first piece of the Juggernaut armor, but don't get complacent. You've got 2 more fights of roughly this difficulty ahead of you before you can collect the whole set, except for the chess piece, and we'll get to that next. The final piece of the Juggernaut armor is located in a series of elven ruins at the center of the forest. Without spoiling it too much, you'll need to come here and perform a ritual in order to acquire access to it. Keep an eye out for a tablet that's in a nearby room near a pool of water. If you find that, it will give you step-by-step instructions on the ritual you have to perform. Once you've performed the ritual, you gain access to a burial chamber, which is guarded by a powerful spirit, and in there, you'll be able to find the final and most central piece of the Juggernaut armor. So let's take a look at Rogue with their statistic distribution. There are really two types of rogues, more of a finesse fighter and more of a powerhouse. With the finesse fighter, you'll want to focus on dexterity and cunning. You'll be using lighter weapons, and that'll really benefit you in the long run. With more of a powerhouse character, you'll want to actually focus on dexterity and strength, again allowing you to wear heavier armors and wield the larger weapons. There are two primary builds for rogues, the Ranger and the Striker. The Ranger will be standing at the back of the combat line, dishing out death from a distance, while the Striker will often be circling around behind foes and hitting as hard as they possibly can with backstabs. Let's take a look at the Archer. The Archer is a perfect character for a rogue that's focused on cunning, because it allows you to actually take the talent Lethality right there in the rogue tree to actually replace cunning in all the calculations that would normally use strength to determine damage. As a result, you can build a character that's much more focused on wits and making sure they get criticals than a character who's big and brawny. Adding to that, you can also use that cunning to your advantage to pick up the Deft Hands line. This allows you to deal with both traps and locks, meaning you'll be opening more chests, pulling more treasure, getting more money for your group. Of course, we want to make sure we're down in the archery tree. There, one of the key things you want to build towards is Master Archer. It gives a buff to every one of your archery abilities and causes you to actually draw faster when you're firing in the main line. As well, an early pickup, one thing you want to make sure you have is, of course, Melee Archer. So if something hits you up close, you're not going to be interrupted. When we look at the highlight items, all the rest have good situational purposes, but Arrow of Slaying is by far the best mage killer out there. The Archer is going to be able to deal with them, often in a single shot. Now let's take a look at the Striker, a different type of rogue that really excels up close and preferably behind their opponent. A Striker typically is going to want to focus on elements that make their melee attacks better. You'll want to pick up Coup de Grace in the rogue tree. It means that if the enemy is stunned for any reason, whether it's something you did or possibly an ice spell from a mage, you're going to start backstabbing, which means you can do maximum damage. As well, the dual weapon talent tree is going to work out very well for you, and all the way up at dual weapon mastery, you're actually able to wield two large weapons, meaning you can have double long swords. Other elements to keep track of are Riposte, which allows you to stun your foe, which again opens up an opportunity for Coup de Grace, or the dual weapon striking, which you should actually be monitoring. Whenever it's active and they're up in your face, you can actually hit with both weapons at once. The moment they turn their back, turn it off and you'll start backstabbing again. With rogues, I'm going to detail for you one of the most obscure quests in the game, which can result in some amazing rogue armor. First off, when you find yourself in a dragon caverns, I won't spoil for you where it is, but I'll tell you might be searching for an ancient relic. You will get a good chance to face a number of drakes. Make sure you loot their bodies. In total, you're looking for 6 drake scales. Catherine's gathered all of the drake scales, and she's come to Denram, to the Market District. This is where you can find Wade's Emporium, Wade being one of the best armor smiths in all of Ferelden. Wade's more than happy to turn your drake scales into leather armor for your party. He'll actually work on 2 different suits, and when you come, make sure you bring a lot of money. If you can afford to pay Wade extra, he'll take extra time and learn more about it, and this can be a long-term investment. Once you've got dragon scales, come back to Wade, and the more practice he's had working with drake scales, the more effective he'll be when he builds plate armor out of those dragon scales for your party, and the better the armor will result. Not wanting to leave our ranged rogue hanging, we've come back to the Brazilian forest. Here you'll face one of the tougher battles in the heart of the ruins, where you'll find in this room a dragon waiting to deal with you. Once you've dealt with the beast, you'll find its hoard tucked in the back of the room. Make sure you loot it. It's full of money, gems, and the most powerful bow in the game. It's right here. Falendin's Reach comes not only with extra damage, but rapid aim, increasing the speed at which you're able to shoot. And finally, we have the Mage. Luckily, they're one of the simplest characters to build statistically. You've got 2 stats you want to focus on. Magic is going to give your spells more punch, make everything you do more effective, including your staff. And with Willpower, you're going to have a larger reserve of mana. That means you're going to be able to cast more spells in every fight. When we think about the Mage and the way we build them, there are certainly some classic archetypes. The healer, the fireball tossing elementalist, and those are fairly self-explanatory. What I want to talk about with you today is a couple of elements you may be missing. So let's go down to some of the deeper trees here. You'll see the first talent here is Walking Bomb, which is certainly fun in and of itself, but further down the tree you'll find Death Siphon that can actually pull mana right out of every dead body in your immediate area. This can be sustained, meaning that it'll keep running all the way through combat and you almost almost never run out of mana. On top of that, at the end of this tree, you'll find Animate Dead, which allows you to cast on a creature that's already dead and restore it to life. The thing that you have to be aware of is that the type of creature you cast it on will result in what type of skeleton will emerge. If you cast it on a mage, there's a chance you're going to get a fireball tossing healer at your side as backup. That can be amazing. One other line that constantly gets overlooked is the hexes. Affliction Hex is a useful start. Certainly, it makes the enemy weaker to all of your elemental damage. But more importantly, when we get to Misdirection Hex, it causes essentially every hit that your enemy would normally do to be a miss, and every crit to be a regular hit. Even better, Death Hex causes everything that you hit them with to be a critical. This is amazing, especially when paired with a rogue who's got benefits to their critical damage. In addition, there's one other build I want to tell you about, and it focuses on a specialization called the Arcane Warrior. You pretty much have to build your mage for this from the ground up, meaning you'll likely do it on the second time you play through the game. But with Arcane Warrior unlocked, you're able to equip armors all the way up to plate mail and wield the heaviest weapons. An Arcane Warrior can actually dish out damage on par and sometimes in excess of what a warrior can do. To build an Arcane Warrior most effectively, you'll want to make sure you're focusing on sustained abilities, because with all that extra weight, you won't be able to cast a lot of spells. Still, as a class, it is probably the most flexible, being able to move almost instantly from a fireball tossing caster all the way to a tank who can wade straight into the thick of battle. So we've got our mage built, we've got a good selection of spells. Equipment is the next logical step, and get ready to go shopping. Some of the best items you can find for the mage are actually located in both the Mage Quartermaster in the Circle Tower and here in the Wonders of Thedas. You can find it in Denerim's Market District, tucked away in a corner. And the proprietor here has some of the best items for your mage to equip. Some of the key items we can actually take a look at here. Winter's Breath, for instance, is possibly one of the best staves in the game, especially for a mage who's been focusing on cold. With this, you'll notice both the cold resistance, the spell power bonus, and the fact that you're doing extra damage with all of your cold spells. So you'll find that the armor that he carries as well includes the Reaper's Vestments, one of the best suits of armor for a mage who occasionally falls under attack. You get a bonus to dodge, a bonus to your constitution, and a resistance to fire, meaning that in almost all situations, you're taking less damage coming in. One final item to keep an eye out for is the Ring of Ages, straight up resistance to almost every element in the game. As a result, you're taking less damage when you're fighting enemy mages. Mix all three of these and you're a potent offensive and defensive caster, meaning you're going to dominate the battlefield. If you find your purse is a bit light, you'll want to head to the Circle Tower. With it being a magically themed dungeon, you'll find a lot of loot in here that will actually help boost your mage's damage and their defenses. One particular piece you'll want to keep an eye out for is in the Templar's Quarters, the third floor of the Mage Tower. In here, you'll find a charred body tucked away in this part of the map that actually holds one of the more powerful pieces of headgear. It is the Libertarian's Cowl. And with it, you have a bonus to defense, which is extremely good when you're dealing with incoming enemy fire. But also, you'll see a mana regeneration, which keeps you in the fight that much longer. We've just scratched the surface of what's possible when you're building your characters in terms of talents, equipment, and their attributes. But really, what's most important to your success in Dragon Age is that you build a party with abilities that complement the way you want to play. Make sure that you've got a natural rhythm and a natural feel for your playstyle. And once you have that down, you'll find you're dominating the battlefield. So that concludes your Warden's training. I'm Mike Laidlaw, this is Catherine Lundgren, and on behalf of the entire Dragon Age team, thanks for watching.
So with Dragon Age Origins, even though it's an absolutely massive game, we actually created a universe that was much bigger than could fit in any one game. So with the downloadable content, what we're hoping to do is allow our players to dive deeper into lots of new areas, lots of lore, which some of it we've only touched on in the main game, and some of it will be completely new as well. Right at launch, there's actually going to be 2 really big pieces of downloadable content. One of them is called Warden's Keep. People that are curious about the history of Ferelden and the Grey Wardens in particular are really going to enjoy this DLC because of how the story unfolds through the use of cinematics and these kind of flashbacks that you experience.
Taking the peak will not be easy, my lord.
I gave the Wardens one chance to die with honor. Instead, they hole up like cowards.
A couple centuries back, the Wardens were expelled from Ferelden. It was a very dark time, especially for the Wardens. Nobody really has the full story of it. The place is rumored to be haunted, and which you discover is true. And this is your opportunity to basically reclaim this lost fortress of theirs for yourself, for the Order. You'll also be able to have new merchants and crafters show up at the keep once you've reclaimed it, and you can get these crafters to now create some pretty cool weapons and armor for you, and you get some cool new abilities as well as you sort of discover some more of the hidden secrets of being a Grey Warden. So the second piece of DLC that we're going to have at launch is an absolutely mammoth piece. I don't think it's ever been done in terms of DLC, something this extraordinary. Stone Prisoner is the story about a golem, a stone golem, that you can discover and reactivate, reanimate.
I was just beginning to get used to the quiet, too.
Now, the really cool thing about this is not only do you get these kind of new areas and a very, very cool, very unique looking party member, it's the fact that it's so deeply interwoven into your main Dragon Age Origins campaign. So as you're traveling throughout the game, the party members all have new VO lines that they react to Shale in the party.
Are you certain you want to bring that thing with us? I am called Shale, by the way.
As you encounter certain characters throughout the game world, and in particular the dwarves, because from their own history, they're very much in tune with golems, even though they've lost the ability to create them. So when you walk through, for example, the halls of Arzamar, which is a dwarven city, with a golem in your party, that is sure to turn heads, and you get a lot of reaction from that as well. As a party member, it's very unique in how it fights. The golem actually runs in 4 different modes, effectively. You basically can run it between an offensive or defensive mode, or ranged attack mode, or as a support figure, so it really changes how you fight as well, which is very cool. So Dragon Age is an absolutely massive, massive universe. We have a plan to support it for approximately 2 years worth of downloadable content. So there's a heck of a lot of content that's going to be coming after this. We've added all sorts of new areas, all sorts of new quests, all new abilities, and really made it into something that is truly spectacular that you'll be able to experience.
My lords and ladies, following these Grey Wardens has cost us our country. Times beyond counting. Stand with me, and we shall defeat even the Blight itself.
Come to me then. We shall make this last night together something to remember.
Just make it quick.
I'm gathering specialists for a mission. It's not going to be easy. The chances of surviving are slim.
Shepard, but you're dead.
Picking up something on the long-range scanner. Unidentified vessel.
It's not the Geth. Brace for evasive maneuvers!
The Chantry foretold the coming of the Darkspawn, but the world was ill-prepared. But when all fell to the forces of darkness, there was one who resisted.
Who dare oppose us?
It's Alfie, you know me. We have second period English together.
Dude, come on.
Ahem. His name was Alphasar, last of the Grey Wardens.
Legitimate.
One man from modest origins, destined to be a hero. Choose your past.
Take my sword. He's dead! With one hand? No!
Shape your present. And determine your future.
You fight like a coward, just like your father.
A hero will rise.
Oh, dude, that was totally awesome.
In an age of dragons.
My name is Joe Potomnik. I'm BioWare's community manager. BioWare has a long history of extensive community support. The centerpiece of the new community is the Dragon Age toolset, one of the most incredible pieces of software to be offered to the modding community, which includes full editors for cutscenes, audio, visual effects, conversations, level creations, and much more. The depth of the Dragon Age toolset, with BioWare's long history of community innovation, will ensure that the Dragon Age community is a thriving center of creativity and content for years to come.
For centuries, we have kept our vigil. We have watched and waited for the Darkspawn to return. There are those who have doubted, who have forgotten, but it has always been our duty to remember. In peace, vigilance. In war, victory. In death, sacrifice. What it means to be a Grey Warden.
They're coming!
Tonight, we have vengeance!
We are the Grey Wardens, men and women from every race, warriors and mages, barbarians and kings. We have watched and waited for the Darkspawn to return. And although we are few now,
I am at your disposal, Grey Wardens.
the Darkspawn must be stopped here and now. There is no turning back. Maker, help us all.